All Cooper CPAs, located in the heart of East Nashville, offer a wide variety of tax services for individuals and businesses. Contact them at 615-257-0646 and visit their website, allcooper.com, for a full list of services.
Today's show is brought to you by locally owned and operated Highland Rim Speedway. Highland Rim Speedway is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year with great short-track, door-to-door stock car racing in a safe, family-friendly atmosphere. Visit their website at highlandrim.com.
Well, the party's over in Washington, or is it just getting started? Coming up next on Political Soup, we'll talk with our own Chip Forrester, who got to see Monday's festivities up close and personal. And what is the Boehner Compromise, and will it put an end to the never-ending battle over the family's money? And President Obama's ambitious plans include a change in his approach to gun control. We're stirring it up, right up to a boil. Next on Political Soup.
From the family grocery hauler to fire-breathing racing engines, the one name you need to know is USA Motor and Machine, located at 51 Cleveland Avenue in Nashville, Tennessee. Give them a call at 615-726-3725 or at usamotorandmachine.com. Bandwidth for today's show is brought to you by SoftLayer.com. We love SoftLayer here at Talkopolis. They are the greatest hosting company ever. They make everything easy. Check out their website at SoftLayer.com. Thanks again for sponsoring the show.
Microcasting for your city. Talkopolis.
Hello, everybody. I'm Joe Williams, and welcome to Political Soup. The guys who make this thing really run. With me, as always, Crom Carmichael, Chip Forrester. We start to our right. Crom, you look rather well-rested today.
Well, I haven't been anywhere, Joe. That's the problem.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Now, on the other hand, your partner, Mr. Forrester, welcome in. Glad to see that you are vertical and taking nourishment after a week in Washington. And, just tell us. You had a good time.
Well, it was a great time. I have to say I'm a little weary. Got in late last night from all the inaugural festivities and the swearing in of the president. But what was really incredible about it is, regardless of whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, to see a peaceful transition. It really wasn't a transition because we were swearing him in for his second term. But to see that process is just inspiring. And really, the bipartisanship of it. Senator Lamar Alexander delivered some remarks that were just really great. Bob Corker was right up front. Could see him hanging over the balcony, and it's just a great experience to be in Washington. And thank God it wasn't 17 degrees like 4 years ago. It was cold, but with long underwear and a good hat, we all stayed warm.
Well, the temperature depends, I guess, on which side you were on and where you were at the time. Did we find anything out? The big deal about the inauguration, besides the festivities, everybody looks towards the president's speech, his address. Did we find anything? Did he share anything we weren't expecting?
Well, I do not have a clue what the president's domestic agenda is for the next 4 years, and I don't even know what it is for the next 1 year.
Oh, come on, Crom. He talked about immigration reform and climate change, the fiscal cliff. He talked all about that with powerful language in his inaugural remarks.
That was a repeat of 4 years ago. I'm just saying, I don't know what he's going to do. The fiscal cliff is over, but the budget and the debt is not over. He's made it pretty clear in his inaugural speech that entitlements are off the table. And so I don't have a clue how he addresses the budget deficit, because let's remember, starting next year, January 1st, we had $100 billion a year. That's, in Washington speak, that's $1 trillion, because they do everything in 10-year increments. Yeah. We had $100 billion a year for Obamacare. And that's not even, it doesn't even raise an eyebrow now in Washington. Well, so Social Security's off the table, Medicare's off the table, Medicaid's off the table, food stamps are off the table, aid to families with dependent children's off the table, and now you got Obamacare. So when I say I don't have an idea, I literally have no idea what the president wants to do.
Well, a couple comments. One, some of those things have been on the table, but let me step back. I think what was important about his inaugural address is that the president defined where he stands on these core issues: climate change, legislation on that, gun violence, and immigration reform. He was very clear. And the interesting thing was, coming off his powerful reelection And this speech, he's in the driver's seat. And it's fascinating that the Republicans have backed away, given some breathing room to the fiscal cliff now. John Boehner has said, we'll give it until May, which I think is a very prudent position for them to take, given the president's power right now and how he comes off of that speech.
Well, you're not talking specifically about the fiscal cliff. Now you're talking about the increase in the debt ceiling.
Pardon me.
Now, but let's look at what Boehner has done, and I think it's good, and we'll see, and we will now get to find out whether or not the president is serious about cutting spending, any spending other than military, because here's where we are now. This is fascinating because now, if you look at the fiscal cliff, normally it takes an affirmative vote for taxes to go up. With the fiscal cliff,
we go over it automatic.
Right? They would go up automatically.
Right,
it would have taken an affirmative vote to keep them from going up. Right. So that didn't happen. Now you have sequestration. You have $1 trillion spread out over 10 years.
10 years, right.
Okay, and so that's not a huge number. It sounds big, but in Washington speak, that's just not that big. But it's still a sequestration that comes up and starts in March. So if the president doesn't negotiate at all,
that goes into effect.
Then that goes into effect. Military spending gets cut, domestic spending gets cut. Then you have the budget, you have the increase in the debt. And what has Boehner done? Boehner has said, is going to pass legislation today that increases the debt ceiling for 90 days. Right. But it says that if Congress, which means the Senate, doesn't pass a budget, that no one in Congress will get a payday after that 90 days. So that means Congress will go unpaid, right. Which is what the voters have essentially said is if Congress didn't go do their job, they ought to not get paid.
And I don't think the president disagrees with that. But let me step back and just offer one other thought about all this. What's interesting about what's happening in Congress now, the rigid ideological right-wing Republicans have softened. And one of the things we've lost in our democracy, particularly over the last number of years, is an ability to have compromise. I mean, this process is like making sausage. It ain't pretty, but it is good in the end when you come up with legislation. And the fact that we've seen some softening on the part of the ideological right to compromise. And it's going to be interesting to see over the next 90 days whether Boehner can kind of bring them in. But the president has put Social Security reform. He has put Medicare and Medicaid on the table. There have been specific ideas that he's talked about. So now we'll see through this sausage-making process over the next 90 days where we get to.
Well, what will happen, Joe, is this. 1st of February, I think it's the 1st of February, but if it's not the first day of February, it's very close. The president, by law, has to submit a budget to the Congress on how much he wants to spend for all the different programs. And so now we will then find out then
what those numbers are.
If in fact he is going to cut Social Security, if he is going to cut Medicare, if those things are on the table. Because so far, and in his inaugural speech, he said they're not on the table.
Well, he also said that tax reform and getting rid of these loopholes is a key part of the component. I know last time we talked about it, you said that's tax increase. It's not. It's about reforming
the tax increase.
It's reforming the tax code.
Okay. Yeah, but it's a tax increase.
2 questions. Throw these two, and again, I sit in the middle, I'm the common man. Most folks will tell you I'm probably more common than I need to be. But if we've got $1 trillion in sequestration coming, and Obamacare is going to cost us $1 trillion, is that not a wash?
Well, that's Obamacare just for openers.
Okay.
Remember, Obamacare was $1 trillion over 10 years, and the first 4 didn't count. So it's really $1 trillion over 6.
Okay.
So it's really closer to 150 to 200 billion a year once it kicks in, and that's the low estimate. What people don't realize is that if a person goes on Obamacare and they sign up for the federal exchange in Tennessee, which the federal government said they're going to set up. If they're making $60,000 a year,
because Governor Haslam refused to set up the local exchange,
he wisely said, "I'm not going to do it."
He chose not to.
He wisely
imprudently chose.
We can talk about that another day. We can talk about that another day. But here's the specifics: a family of 4 making $60,000 will get almost $16,000 of taxpayer subsidy for their health care. Now that's a brand new entitlement. $16,000 per family of 4. Now, what we don't know is how many employers are going to say, I'd rather pay the $2,000 in penalty and let my employees be subsidized by the federal government.
Well, we'll see.
And if a larger number than 10 million do, then the number isn't 100 to 150 billion a year. It's $300 to $400 billion.
But the other point you're missing in all this, Crom, you're talking about it from the backside. The front side of it is that there are tens of millions of people who are not covered, young people who don't choose to get health care, who are now going to go into the system. They're not necessarily happy about it, but that's going to amortize the cost of health care over all that group of people. And the whole point of Obamacare is to bend the cost curve, is to bring the escalating costs of health care in our country down. Because if it continues on the curve that it's been on, there's no money. I mean, it is the single biggest challenge our economy has. And Obamacare, the components of it, and you and I can argue about whether that happens or not, bends that cost curve over the next 5 to 10 years.
Well, it doesn't.
I disagree.
And I will tell you, and I'll tell you why it doesn't.
Because I'm not an expert on all those details, but what I have read, there are components to it that do bend that cost curve.
They're not. When a person goes to the doctor's office, there are 7 different entities that have to touch that invoice just to get it paid.
But there are efficiencies. They're talking about electronic medical records. They're talking about efficiencies in that system that don't exist today. It ends that.
We're
going to have to spend a whole time on
we got a whole segment here.
If a person goes to the doctor who doesn't have insurance today, how do they pay?
Either out of pocket or it's charity care.
Right, and the doctor will give a discount if they don't have to fiddle with the insurance. And they'll give somebody a discount of 50 or 60%, because I get that regularly.
Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't.
Well, what I'm saying is this, Chip, they won't give it if they have to go through the bill-paying system, the insurance
managed care
system.
programs negotiate lower costs for their employees.
No, they don't. That's the whole point. Here's what happens. Here's what happens. You pay a great big insurance premium. A great big insurance premium so somebody else can negotiate the price down to a number that's higher than what the doctor would take if you just simply paid the day of the service. So you're paying more, and you're also having to pay an insurance company a huge gob of money. And Chip, in this case, it'll be the taxpayers who are paying $16,000 for an average family's insurance. It'll be the biggest entitlement we have ever had. And it will dwarf Medicare. It will dwarf Medicaid. Obamacare will be the most expensive government program ever.
I disagree. We can have a whole show on that.
Fair enough. As a matter of fact, we may discuss, my opinion as a middleman is that the entire medical billing system is broke anyway.
Right.
I'll give you the example. A couple of weeks ago, I had a medical test. I had an MRI. It was $2,800.
You're okay, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm gonna be all right.
But, we don't want to lose our host.
But $2,800 was the charge. Because of the insurance coverage, the provider was immediately cut from $2,800 to $900, and then the insurance took care of whatever. I wind up out a couple $100, whatever it was.
Out of pocket.
My concern is they charged $2,800, they got paid $900.
Where'd the rest go?
Not only that, but if I'm not covered by some kind of insurance that's negotiated this, I'm now responsible for $2,800.
So
I'm broke.
That's the fallacy.
Well,
that's the fallacy, because my son had a stress fracture 2 years ago as a runner.
Okay.
I called 5 places. I said I need an MRI. $400 as long as I paid day of service.
Really?
Yeah, and I paid day of service. I paid day of service by credit card, $400. And this is exactly the point. They put this high retail price on it so that the insurance company can then act like they're negotiating the price down. And they negotiate it down to a really high price. It'd be like an insurance company telling you, if you'll insure your car with me, I'll help you buy that Chevrolet for $42,000 instead of $80,000. Well, you know $80,000 is a bad deal because you know what a car ought to cost, because there's a market for it. But there is no market in healthcare with the insurance companies negotiating. And let me be clear about something. I'm not saying that insurance companies are all a bunch of bad guys. I'm saying that we shouldn't be insuring something that costs $50 to $100. It ought to be paid day of service. The market would set the price, and it would be a much lower price in the aggregate than it is now. And in fact, in the example you used, it was half the price, and you're still paying a great big premium.
But Crom, what you're talking about is going back and completely reforming the whole system. It doesn't exist that way. There's a system that's in place, and
it's a mess.
It's a
and Obamacare has made it is going to make it much worse.
I disagree with you. And the cost cutting initiatives that are in there, bending the curve. I mean, one of the things they've talked.
Not there.
They are. We need to. We'll have a whole show on it.
Yeah, we will.
Next week, I'm telling you, get your pistols ready. We're going to put them back to back and let them walk 10 paces and. we'll get this healthcare thing handled. Tell you what, there's more to come. Stay with us here on Political Soup.
Jeff Meeks and Chris Austin invite you to watch your favorite sports event at the Batter's Box at 43 Hermitage Avenue in Nashville, Tennessee. The Batter's Box offers shuttle service to all Titans home games. It's a great place for friends to gather for the game and after the game. So check out the Batter's Box Bar and Grill, and thanks again for sponsoring the show.
And welcome back, everybody, to Political Soup. We finally got these guys settled down on the health care without needing a health care provider. So I'm kind of pleased with that. We go to our second segment today. We're going to talk a little bit about, as we have already, the national debt ceiling limit. The Republicans in the House passing today legislation that is a compromise, affectionately known, I guess, as the Boehner Compromise. Throws everything into the seat of the Senate to pass a budget. One thought that has crossed my mind in the past couple of days, gentlemen, is this just another case of bad parenting?
Well, Joe, first of all, the House is going to pass a bill today to raise the debt limit for about 90 days.
That's what I call bad parenting. They're not fixing the problem.
Well, they can't.
They've just kicked it down the road forever.
No, they're not kicking it down the road. They're saying we'll have 90 days for us to negotiate what kind of spending cuts we'll have. That's what the Republicans want.
Or tax reform.
Because the president has said that he will cut spending. Now we're going to find out. But here's what's more interesting to me. Forget Obama for a second. The Senate, run by the Democrats, has not passed a budget in 4 years. The media just gives them a pass and says that's okay. That's the most irresponsible thing I can think of for a House of Congress, or you got the House and the Senate. I don't know that the Senate will pass Boehner's compromise, if they will sign on to it. Now, so then what happens is, in the next 2 weeks, we reach the debt limit. And
I think there's a good probability that they're going to sign on, because this allows for that 90 days to have the negotiation, have the discussion. And with the Republican ideological right softening and demonstrating a willingness to have a compromise and talk about it. I mean, you're hearing all sorts of Republican members of Congress talking about, okay, we'll come to the table, which is what we need to see. That I think there's a good likelihood that the Senate will pass that bill to get through this negotiating period. And then everything's on the table. And it's going to be very fascinating to see. The president is in a very powerful position. He comes off a powerful re-election, great inaugural speech, and he's going to hold the line on certain things, and we'll see what happens over the next.
Well, he's already gotten his $800 billion tax increase without giving up a dime of spending cuts. So now the question is going to be...
And he said that. He said, I'm running to ensure that the top 2% pay their fair share in taxes.
And he got it.
And he got it.
Yeah. So now what we're going to find out
and elections
is...
have consequences, Crom, and one of them is that the president won this thing.
Yeah.
And
we're not a dictatorship, Chip. I know you'd like for us to be, but the House was won by the Republicans. And the people who voted for the members of the House didn't vote for higher taxes, didn't vote for crushing our economy. Here's what's interesting. If you are a spouse in California and your spouse is in the top income tax bracket. Now,
moving to Tennessee.
Here's what's interesting. The very first dollar you earn, if you're, say you're a real estate agent, the very first dollar you earn, you're in the 71% tax bracket on your first dollar of income. And Obama wants more. Obama wants more. How much is enough? Is 110% sufficient?
You can't get 110%.
Can you get 100? Now wait a second. Could you get 100?
Theoretically, but that's not
going
to happen.
Who would work? Who would work if their tax rate were 100%?
Well, you're right.
Okay, thank you.
I believe they've tried that in the nation
across
the big ocean.
Yeah. And so what's going to be really interesting now is to see what happens, because tax rates are now incredibly high, because people don't realize part of what Obama got in this recent tax increase is the Medicare tax is now 3.8% on every dollar of income. So even if you're a movie star making $20 million, guess what? You're paying 3.8% on just Medicare. So in order to have coverage when you're over 65, theoretically, you're going to be paying $700,000 to $800,000 a year for your premium. Isn't that interesting? And that's considered to be by the progressives fair, which I find an interesting interesting argument.
You'd be better off to just call around and get a $400 MRI.
There you go.
Save your money.
Exactly.
I mean, seriously.
Exactly.
Theoretically.
Theoretically.
Well, practically, I did it.
Oh, that's good. That's the
That's
fun
actual
part.
practical.
I
So
gotta
anyway,
try that
so
next
what's
time.
going to be interesting is the Senate's now going to have to they're either going to have to
Come up with their own bill, or they're going to pass what the House has.
what the House has in order to extend it 90 days. And then if they extend it 90 days, in that bill it says the Senate must pass a budget,
Right.
which they have refused to do for 4 years.
Right.
So I hope that they agree, and then I hope that when Obama submits his budget, then we'll get to actually see what he wants to do.
And we'll see what the House has said, what the Senate said, and the President, and
Yeah.
we'll negotiate that out within
Yeah.
these 90-day periods.
Yeah.
Now, when all these guys get together, one of the things, the option is the House passes, the Senate doesn't, debt ceiling hits.
Then what happens? Who's
We
at
can't-
fault then?
Well,
Who's
here-
at fault
but
then,
here-
Chip?
Wait a minute. Before we get to fault, here's my question. The debt ceiling hits. We are, quote, broke. We're whatever term you want to use.
We're not paying the bills that
We're not
we've
paying the
incurred,
bills.
that we've incurred.
Government starts to shut down, et cetera.
It doesn't. That doesn't
Well,
work. That isn't
okay.
what'll happen.
But theoretically,
That
it
didn't
should.
what happened. When the debt ceiling is not increased, if it is not increased, the revenue doesn't stop.
Okay.
So it still has to balance the budget at that point, and it would
makes
be
decisions as to what we're going to pay.
yeah,
Okay.
it would be forced to do that. But let's be clear about something. The Republicans in the House, if they do what they say they're going to do today, will extend the debt for another 90 days. If the Senate refuses to go along, my question to my good friend Chip is it the House Republicans who are at fault for the debacle that is supposedly going to happen, or is it the Senate Democrats who are responsible?
Well, I think the other point is that what does the Senate propose? Do they accept the House bill that gets passed today in the House, or do they propose something else and there's a negotiation? And we don't know until we see what they're going to do. And therefore, I don't want to assign fault to the Democrats or the Republicans until we see what they're going to do. The point of this, and I keep coming back to it, you have this hard line. There's got to be a compromise. There's got to be a discussion. And the president has said all along in the campaign, one, there's going to be tax reform, particularly for the top 2%. But he also put spending cuts on the table. The Republicans said no. It is all about there will be no tax reform or tax cuts for the tax increases, for the top 2%. There have to be spending cuts. And the president said, I won this election with 300 plus electoral college votes, the popular vote, and I'm going to hold the line. And he won that in the last debate. Now we're going to see over the next 90 days, or really the next couple of weeks, whether the Senate comes up with a bill or not.
And he got $800 billion of tax increase,
which he said he was going to ask for.
Chip,
You seem to what's interesting
Well,
about
where's the
Crom-
compromise, Chip? You keep saying that there ought to be a compromise.
I understand. The point is, this
What
is
are the-
what
what
he
are
got
the-
elected on.
All right, what
he
are the
won
House-
that. He won that battle a couple weeks ago. And it's interesting. The Republicans would not have gone along with him had they known that they were in the hot seat. The American people were for it. The president got elected. So now the next question is, there will be negotiations on spending decreases.
We'll see.
We'll see. I'm confident that you'll see that.
Here's my concern. Yes, the president won the election. Was it a mandate? I don't think 51% of the popular vote is a mandate.
I understand.
My question is, what I'm looking for is a president who will represent more than the 51%. I need somebody who's going to represent 65, 70% of the country. I'm not looking for a representative who's going to represent only that 49%.
Well, I don't even.
There's got to be compromise, but guys, we talk compromise, but it ain't happening.
Joe,
Well, it did. Actually, that's wrong. No, let me just quickly say, I think Speaker Boehner did compromise. He said, okay, we read the handwriting on the wall. We will put a 90-day. We'll put 90-day compromise on the table so that the country does not pay its bills, and now we'll negotiate, and now we'll talk. So I commend Speaker Boehner for putting that out there. I hope the Senate follows suit, accepts that.
But it wasn't just that.
Well, there were some other conditions.
It said that Congress must pass a budget.
Right.
Do you think that's reasonable?
Yes.
Okay. So if the Senate won't agree to the terms of passing a budget, then you would agree that the Democrats are at fault.
Well, let's wait and see what the Senate does. You keep wanting to get me. You're trying to put me in a box to say the Senate is at fault. I don't want to say that. I want to see. I'll agree with you when we see that they're not stepping up and doing what they need to do. But until then, the president got what he needed the other day. Speaker Boehner's giving us a window to have a discussion we need to have, and we'll see what the Senate does.
So if Crom changed it to say, if the Senate doesn't, you would agree with that?
That's what I said.
Yeah.
He said he don't want to be put in that box so that he can change his mind and say something different if they haven't. So we'll see.
We'll see.
Yeah.
You know, the only thing I can guarantee you that's going to happen in all this is come February, come April 15th, somebody's paying the tax bills. Now, you know, you guys know tax season is right here on top of us. Let me tell you, our friends over at All & Cooper do a great job from everything from 1040s to business taxes and handling all your business accounting function. That's our friends at All & Cooper. Check them out at allandcooper.com. That's AULL Cooper.com. When we come back, we'll find one more thing to make these two guys crazy. I feel like I'm getting bruised in the middle of all this. Stay with us on Political Soup.
All & Cooper CPAs, located in the heart of East Nashville, offer a wide variety of tax services for individuals and businesses. Contact them at 615-257-0646 and visit their website, allcooper.com, for a full list of services.
And welcome back, everybody, to Political Soup. Joe Williams, Crom Carmichael, Chip Forrester. Chip, more movement by the president on the issue of guns.
Well, we saw him introduce 23 executive orders. There are a whole series of Crom, stop chuckling over there. And there, a lot of them are very substantive in terms of increasing the ability to do effective background checks. And also a couple of them deal with mental health, the agencies working together. So the president stepped up and issued 23 executive orders. I can go through them all if you want, but at least that's the first step towards addressing gun violence.
And if I told you solving problems like this through executive orders makes me nervous, what would you say?
Well, the thing about these executive orders is they do not trample the Second Amendment. They do not. They are constitutionally valid by all the attorneys that have looked at it. So, but any effective change in our gun laws will be required to come through the United States Congress. And the president has offered proposals through Joe Biden and the group that met over the last couple of weeks to do that.
Let me just say this.
Here we go.
Okay. This whole thing about gun stuff and registration and all this is just the silliest thing in the world. Let me tell you why. There's a guy named Mike Thompson. Mike Thompson is a Democrat from California. He has been selected by Obama to be chairman of the Gun Violence Prevention Task Force. So that's this task force that's supposed to come up with recommendations. He wrote an article in the Wall Street Journal. He himself wrote it, or at least it has his name on it. And he says this: in 2010, there were 9 categories of people who could not own a gun. Okay? At the federal level. The FBI reported 76,000 cases of suspected people who shouldn't own a gun to the Bureau of the people who are supposed to investigate it.
Bureau of Tobacco and Alcohol.
They prosecuted 44. 44 out of 76,000. That's how many they prosecuted. Now, this is going to be kind of like Obamacare being turned over to the IRS to try to adjudicate that. Be the biggest cluster you've ever seen. It'll just be a mess. Now you have, in 2010, Bush wasn't in office, so you can't blame Bush. Obama was in office, 76,000 reports by the FBI, 44 prosecutions. And now what they want to do is build a database to 150 million people. It's just going to be absolutely stupid.
What are you saying, Crom? That the fact that they only prosecuted 44 cases is that's not enough prosecution, or that the 44 were ridiculous to prosecute? The point is there were not the resources. Part of the executive orders that he signed last week are to bring resources to be able to do this, to have a more effective national background check system.
And that's money. More money.
It's actually the dollars are not significant.
Wait, hold on. Define not significant.
Well, I mean, when you're talking about the programs, that the background check program, and inefficiencies in it, and what these executive orders, and I've not read, I've gone through some of them. I've not read all 23. They are to enhance that system and make it more effective nationally, and to close loopholes, and to make it work as a national database. But the point is, it's a step. Listen, nothing is. In many ways, this is a Band-Aid on a pretty big wound. So the question is, at least he's taking steps forward to clean up a system with executive orders that don't trample on the Second Amendment. It
is.
So you don't think he should have done any of this? This is just all silly?
I haven't read the 23 executive orders. What I've looked at is his performance in 2010, and this is based on a Democrat who he selected to run this commission. And this Democrat is pointing out that the laws we have on the books now are so ineffective. 44 out of 76,000, Chip, I think even you would agree, that's a pretty low percentage.
Well, but the question is to not have the resources to prosecute them? I don't know the details.
And you said it's not going to cost much money to do what you want to do, and what I'm simply saying is that to force 150 million people to register is going to be either expensive
it's not forcing,
or...
wait a second, wait. It's not forcing 150 million. It's if people want to have access to firearms, they're going to register.
What about the 150 million people who already have them? Are they going to have to register?
Right. Well, that's,
okay, so they're going to be forced to register.
No, and okay. No, I'm coming out of the woodwork here because, there's basically, and yes, I know this is an NRA tagline, but there's only two reasons for the national government to want me to register my firearms, and it's either to tax them or take them. Now, I've tried to be calm. I've got a little problem when you're telling me that Washington should know that I've got my grandfather's .22 rifle that's 60-something years old, but still very effective on a target course. None of your business, to an extent. I mean, for the rest of them, I have passed all the requirements. My background's been checked.
Joe, it's real simple. Take your guns and put them in your bedroom, because Democrats won't go in your bedroom. Anything you want to do in your bedroom, you can do, because they want to protect your privacy in your bedroom. Anything you want to do. So clean your guns in your bedroom. Keep them in your bedroom. You won't have to register them.
Okay, you got the floor.
Oh, I don't know. I'm not going to. He's just having fun. He's just loving
Well, it's because it's so stupid. These Democrats who say we've got to do something. Well, let me say this. It is possible in order to do something that you do something really stupid. And that's what this is. That's what this is. Trying to make 150 million people register their handguns is foolish. Now, let's look what they've done in New York. They've got all this legislation now about semi-automatic. And you know what? The way the media reports it, you'd think semi-automatic was a machine gun. Mm-hmm. Semi-automatic is you just simply have to pull the trigger.
Well, it's an AR-15. I mean,
no, it's a handgun.
It's a .22 rifle my grandfather gave me.
A .22 rifle is considered semi-automatic if you just have to pull the trigger to make it.
It's got a magazine that has more than one bullet in it. It's a multiple.
It holds 15 shells.
I'm simply saying it ain't a machine gun.
And one of the things he's talking about is reducing the magazines to a maximum of 10 shells in a magazine.
Well, that's when the devil's in the detail on that. I mean,
then they use terms like military style weapon.
That's the AR-15.
No. Well, but military style weapon means aesthetically it looks like it. It doesn't perform like it, but it looks like it. And so all of a sudden now you've got all of these guns out there. And by the way, there are hunting rifles that look like a military gun, except they aren't. But they look like it. And so now all of a sudden they're going to be outlawed because they look like it. And so for those people who say Obama is not trying to get your guns, they're just simply wrong. And Chip, if you don't think Obama's trying to get people's guns, I apologize. You're just simply wrong.
Even if it's not direct.
And it ain't going to happen because there's a bunch of Democrat senators, like Joe Manchin. He's the guy that came out and said 30 clips is ridiculous. 2 days later, he was supporting the NRA. Because he got a bunch of telephone calls from people in West Virginia saying, Joe, you're not taking my gun.
So you've come at this discussion, which we've had a couple times on this show, from analyzing what the president's doing and what Joe Biden's doing, and it's all silly. The question I challenge you on is, we have a problem in our country. We had children who were killed. Mm-hmm. What solutions are you offering? What are you putting on the table? At least the president has stepped up and addressed this and done it quickly. Because there's a problem in our country with this kind of violence. So and in here there are 2 or 3 of the executive orders that specifically address the mental health issue that you and I have talked about, and we see as the underlying sort of the root cause of the problem. It's crazy people that are getting these weapons and doing this, not regular people. And the background checks and the analysis of that is for that. But my question is, what do you want to do? All you are doing is telling us that the president's executive orders and the plan that he has is ridiculous, but I don't hear anything on your side as to what you would do to address this problem.
Okay, 2 things. As far as schools are concerned, fire a bureaucrat and hire a security guard. That's number 1. Okay. Number 2,
instead of... So you support the NRA, that's the NRA's fundamental position?
They don't want to fire a bureaucrat. I want to fire a bureaucrat. Okay. I'm not trying to figure out how to spend more money.
Okay.
But I know this, that the school budgets are bloated with a bunch of wasteful bureaucrats. fire them and hire a security guard.
Okay,
That's
point.
number one for schools. Number two, I'd rather spend the money on mental health than trying to identify, track down, and keep track of 150 million law-abiding citizens. There's a small number of mentally ill people. You don't need to go after 150 million to go after that. So rather
But
than
if you don't start with knowing the 150 million within that population is where that small group of crazy people are.
Not
and if you don't-
necessarily.
No, they're within that population. I mean, how are you going to?
Well, then identify the crazy people first, Chip. Not go after the 150 million.
The problem is that the difficulty in identifying the crazy people to begin with. That's where the mental health component.
I disagree.
Okay.
I disagree. Most of these people who have committed these heinous crimes
Right.
and these crazy crimes, they had mental health problems that were known. They had mental health problems that were known, but because of our privacy, nobody could tell anybody.
But also because of the way the gun laws, the
No.
gun registration laws, they could get weapons that they shouldn't have gotten.
The guy at the
that's what these executive orders are addressing.
And Chip, a crazy person will get the guns.
Well, there's always going to it's
a
like
crazy person
although
will
we've
get
been
the
pretty
guns.
good. We've kept bombs off of airplanes. We've done a pretty good job with Homeland Security. So that's obviously worked. What's interesting to me too is that you approach that. You look at the sort of national background check system. We have the same thing with all of us who get on an airplane. We have basically eliminated the risk in flying in terms of being blown up by Al Qaeda or whoever's going to take the plane. Not perfect, but it hasn't been one. We haven't had any problems recently. So that same system that none of us particularly like, taking our belts and shoes and everything off, it has accomplished something positive. This is addressing that same sort of addressing the problem in the same way, a national database. And I don't see it, I mean, with the executive orders and what they're talking about, creating efficiencies and ability to do that, is all that wrong.
They're not even close to being the same, Chip. If they were going to be the same, then you would have people who would be searched if they were getting on a public bus. You would have people being searched if they were getting on the subway. You would set up a bureaucracy that would break down. At least at an airport, you can funnel people through, and it's a relatively small number of people compared to the population. How many people travel out of Nashville a day? 10,000? That's not 600,000 or a million, and you're trying to track them all. And this is what I'm saying. There's some things that are just absolutely stupid, and this is absolutely stupid.
I'm not sure I'll go that far.
It is.
But it's my fear of unintended consequences.
Well, I don't disagree that the devil is in the details, and there's a big plan here.
Let's face it. I'm from the government. I'm here to help you. Does not
make you feel warm.
Make you feel warm and fuzzy, and that's from somebody who's been in the position to have to say that to people before.
Yeah, and
it doesn't make you feel good to go out and say that because you know that's not going to get a good response.
There are 8 Democrats in the Senate who are up for re-election in 2 years. So let's see if they vote along with this national database in those 8 states. They will not win re-election if they do. And I just think it's going to be humorous.
Well, I'm not certain about that.
They won't say a word, Chip. Mary Landrieu hadn't said a word. Mark Pryor in Arkansas hadn't said a word. That person up there in the Dakotas hadn't said a word. Backus out in Montana, twiddling his thumb. Even Al Franken, crazy Al Franken, he won't say anything about guns because the people of Minnesota like to have their guns and they like to have their privacy.
Yep.
And Al Franken's sitting up there twiddling his thumbs right past the graveyard. So I hope he does come out in favor of strict gun control, registration, all that stuff, because I'd like to be rid of him in 2 years.
You know, the thing that may be sad in all this is what prompted this was that terrible tragedy at Newtown, which is what's reinvigorated this argument. It wasn't the 300-400 murders in Chicago. It wasn't the children on the streets in Memphis who just happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. That happens. Yeah, that was, that's just 1 or 2. You get 20, it's a different story. Why? We've got to get control.
And Joe,
understanding all the way
let's
around.
just be clear. Do you think the criminals in Chicago are going to go register their guns?
That's my point. You think the crazy folks are,
No, they're not crazy. They're just criminals.
Well,
do you think they're going to register? Do you think the
when
criminals?
we talk about the mental health aspect.
Well, no. That's why I'm saying you don't identify people who have guns who have mental health problems. You identify people who have mental health problems and then keep them from getting guns. I'd rather spend my money on that.
Well, the other point, too, in any sort of social policy discussion, there's a tipping point. And what happens when these great tragedies happen, it pushes the issue to a tipping point. And we are at a tipping point. And I'd say, the NRA hurt themselves when they came out with the sort of hardline position that they took. And the American people are in favor. They're probably like every other regular person out there, not understanding all the details, but they're in favor of doing something. And the president, with Joe Biden's leadership, have stepped up and offered 23 executive orders and a plan to Congress. And we'll see what Congress does. We'll see what happens in the next.
Even in Obamacare, there's a section in Obamacare that prohibits doctors and nurses from asking people about guns.
And you have not read the 23 executive orders, because it says, it specifically addresses that in one of the executive orders right here, number 17. I can't find the one. Oh, here it is. Clarify that Affordable Care Act does not prohibit doctors asking their patients about guns in their home.
Actually, there's language in
addresses that.
In the next show, I'll bring in the language that he says he's now by executive order trying to change. Now, here's what's interesting about Obama. A piece of legislation passes the way it's supposed to in this country. He then later decides, I don't like that legislation. So he writes an executive order nullifying the legislation.
Wait. It's not the legislation, it is the regulations that the president has the right to change by executive order. The legislation, this change, let's be clear, we pass legislation, and then we have departments, whether you like them or not. I know as a Republican you'd like to get rid of all of them. These departments promulgate rules and regulations that operate. That's what Obama, and so from Obamacare, we passed the Affordable Care Act, and it's a big book, 1,900 pages or whatever, and then there are probably 3,000 or 4,000 pages of regulations.
13,000 so far.
Okay, 13,000 so far. Thank you. I mean, we can argue philosophically, but the point is, the president does have a right to change by executive order those regulations, not the law. So I just want to be clear on that.
I'll bring in the section of the law that prohibits it. Not some regulator writing it.
Okay, I'd like to see that. I disagree with you till I see that.
All right.
All right. It is time to separate these two for a few more days. Let them go back to their respective corners and get reloaded. Gentlemen, as always, a very lively show.
Right on target, Joe.
Right on target.
I've been waiting for that one.
Right on target, baby.
Crom's our funny.
Oh, me.
Man, what a great one. Listen, we want to thank you for joining us for Political Soup. For Crom Carmichael, Chip Forrester, I'm Joe Williams. Hopefully we'll see you the next time, or hopefully you'll see us. With these two.
Yeah, we can't see them.
I'm not sure I'm ever going to make it back, so hopefully you'll see me the next time. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you next time.